And the main part of today's video was to, one, highlight the fact of the Ravencoin community pushing forward, getting the iOS wallet out. If anybody that has been following Ravencoin doesn't own any Ravencoin, that community has been building content since the release of the Ravencoin network, officially since January. And, you know, here we are on October 12th, and they've delivered on doing a very, what I would say is one of the better wallets out there from what I've experienced so far on that wallet, from the features and functionality, from the Touch ID, setting limits on Touch ID. I mean, there's a handful of features in there that I think we're leaning forward as a baseline of what wallets can be, and that's just not me shilling Ravencoin in general. I think if you go out, and even if you don't own Ravencoin, and just download that wallet and take a look at it and just see the wizard that walks through it. I have recorded a different device with the setup of it. That video will be out on YouTube. I'm trying to keep that to like a 2-minute video that's just a tutorial on how to install the wallet, where to get it, how to back up the phrase factoring that you can restore it, and then what that means. Having discussions with folks in the crypto space and not understanding, you know, the basic premises of cryptocurrency, but let alone if they have a wallet and what happens if they lose their phone and how do you restore it, all that kind of stuff I'm trying to put into the video also. You know, some of the people noticing the price increase. So I don't think the price increase had anything to do with the wallet coming out. I think that you did gain access to people that could now have something that is a little easier to use, and easy to use is one of the key parts of adoption. If you have an application and the interface sucks, it's going to be hard to get people to adapt to it. So good wallet tech and seamless design and ease of use is critical in any adoption phase, right? So it starts with a wallet, and not a lot of people are going to download the online wallet. You know, this is a good step in the right direction. So this is what we're going to be looking at real quick. I have it right here actually, and we'll pop it up. I do have the app itself on my phone too. While this is a step forward on security standpoint, where it is air gapped, essentially, so you don't have to plug this into anything like a Trezor or, you know, Ledger X, where you actually have to plug these into a computer to then digitally sign the transaction. This is completely air gapped. This never touches a cable at all. The only cable it has is for charging, and to actually update the device. And I actually have it here. We can get to it. But bottom line, you have a wallet on your phone, just like any other phone wallet. And when you go to digitally sign the transaction, so if you think about any kind of wallet transaction that you're about to do, if you you grab the QR code from whoever you're sending it to make the transaction, you need this device. So when you go to hit send, it's going to pop up and say, you know, scan essentially my security code. And that security code is going to be on this device to make that transaction. It digitally signs it with this. This is the signing authority. So you can think of this like your little signing authority pocket piece, which it's just digital. It has a camera to scan. And the only reason why you'd use that camera here for that is when you're first setting up that wallet to pair it with your phone device. So your phone is going to create that pair between this device. That's why it's completely air capped, and it's just scanning a QR code essentially. And then there's a charge port here, and we could probably go here and show you guys. Let me go to this. So this is the device itself. That little charge port right there is just the way it's wired, at least from the spec, the technical spec, is that this plugs into a normal outlet brick. Now, I haven't done a teardown of this device, and I've been talking to a friend that's actually a hardware engineer about maybe opening this device up. If you guys would be interested in that, we would actually pop this guy open and take a look at it. From the way that's actually, you know, put together, i.e., you know, a lot of people will charge things like on a computer, and the last thing I want to do is plug this thing into a computer. But you know, opening it up and just, you know, seeing if there are any data ports connected to that. You know, was this a standard board? What's the board look like? That kind of thing. So doing more of a deeper dive of the internals on this. You know, a passcode that you can log into it there. It's got a touchpad. It's actually pretty nice. Screen quality. The actual weight of it's pretty good. I mean, they you know, they didn't do an ICO or anything for this. They did it like an Indiegogo, so it was funded through, you know, typical and traditional means when it comes to crowdfunding. this is a good alternative because it does give me that air-gapped security solution to where I want to go exchange it, or if somebody tries to spoof my iPhone and gets my provider and is able to get through all the security barriers there, and then are able to get a clone of essentially my accounts and then try to send money out of it. That's what the point of one of those devices is that they cannot do that without that device. So it is just another line of defense if you're going to hold your own keys and not use a custodial service. This Panama crypto person did a real good job of depicting and breaking down essentially each of the questions that were asked at the Senate committee, and then essentially the answers. And you can see some of these questions, what is Bitcoin? Obviously, Peter did very well at answering that. Where do you see things going in the next year or coming? So what conditions do you see the market value stabilizing? So, I mean, that's a real good loaded question, right? Of like, how do you think things are going based on your viewpoint in the crypto space, and what are the conditions that you see the market value stabilizing? And Peter's answer to that came around. Valken's answer to this was, I don't know if I fully agree with or Peter's answer to this. I don't know if I fully agree with it, but it's his perspective was more and more regulation that is light touch, and then having some options when it comes to the ETFs and overall stabilization of additional investment vehicles in the space through custodial and vetted services. So more infrastructure, bottom line, is what he was really coming down to. And I think that's a partial answer. I think, yes, you could put more, all of the actions of like ETFs and financial indexes and all of that kind of stuff come down to the ability to create a liquidity pool. There are people to be able to spend and invest into the space, thereby creating a liquidity pool to be working, for the funds to work with. And, there is a litany of things that need to be fixed when it comes to the exchanges, the wash trading, and just the overall fraudulent actions that are going there. So I think it's still a little early for some of that. Seeing how people that I know that had made their own decisions, be it informed or ill-informed, on buying into the hype last year when it came into, going headlong into ICOs, going headlong into things that were obvious scams like BitConnect and that. There needs to be kind of a solid understanding at an investor level, Joe Blow down the street kind of thing, to where people have a basic understanding of what it is. People have a basic understanding of what the financial markets are in Wall Street, and know that there's still a lot of bull crap that needs to be fixed in that. But at least there's some level of protection there for people that are not going to do the due diligence to have an umbrella on coverage. And, it's cynical to think that people are going to be going through and doing all that due diligence on their own. People just don't have, we use common services for reasons, meaning we go and have our oil changed at oil change places, even though a majority of us could go do it ourselves. But it's about time, value, money. It's about what you have on your own agenda. And this goes for investing too, where people are not going to have the economics degrees, understand how to read a TA chart, right? They're going to believe in other people to do that. And until you can have some enforcement on the sanctity of those products, and the ripe fraud that occurs in those products, you're going to have, the larger institutions that are not going to, or you're not going to have the regulatory bodies not, validate some of that. So if folks want to play in that market, that stuff has to be cleaned up. Now, that's not saying that's the only thing out there. There's decentralized exchanges. There's going to be a intermediary of interactions on the asset side from people exchanging value like they are on Bitcoin right now without in unregulated markets. But until the ecosystem can help protect against obvious fraud in some kind of mechanical way, much in the way that Bitcoin allows parties to interact without a trusted third party, there needs to be innovation on the decentralized part also to be able to protect people against fraud. And I think that's a very hard, obvious thing to try to protect against, because if blockchains don't filter out garbage in, right? You can still do garbage and bad information into a blockchain. It's just going to store it, and it's going to be out there for forever. I think his answer on that was good, but I think that it was a little little premature to say that by itself would stabilize the markets. I think it's going to be more on the regulation side before you can see a little bit more conditioning on that. And I think cryptos isn't probably going to go down that stability. I think it's going to go up. Third question, are particular factors hindering implementations or adoptions of blockchain or decentralized computing solutions where the most meaningful steps that our market participants or regulators cannot create a certain or prominent safe path forward? So essentially that in English is there something hindering the solutions going forward? And I think this came down to him just saying, a light touch, don't try to throw the baby out with the bathwater type of situation, to where if you have some bad actors and you have, potentially people that aren't just doing it on a fraudulent standpoint on the fiduciary side, just on the capital and the cash side of cryptocurrency, but actually like people that are using it for drug trade or trafficking or any of that kind of stuff. While there are people that are going to use good tech for bad things, you shouldn't shut down all the tech. And I think that was the piece that was brought out there. The Ethereum development team, there's a lot of issues with Ethereum right now on the scaling and syncing even the blockchain. There's a lot of issues out there, but that's not inhibiting people from having the ETH DevCon in Prague later this month. People are still moving forward through all the FUD and trying to produce a product that actually is usable and functional and going through this iteratively. And part of this thing as being iteratively is that when you have those fell cycles, typically those are out there and you learn from them. But in this case, everything is very public. I mean, you see it, you feel it because you're essentially testing on live. You're going to get those cycles where you're going to have some hate and stuff towards it. So I don't think there's anything hindering. I think we're right up against the edgeware of technology in general. This next question here, and I'm not really talking to Nouriel's response to most of these because most of his functional responses were fraught with figures that kept changing. Like he started with like 60 to 70% of, crypto is not usable, it's fraud, and then he was ending the argument with 80 to 90%, as if like it was getting worse while he was sitting there. So it kind of really dampened, and tempered his entire argument of the piece. He didn't even come there as an economist. He didn't come there with actual hard numbers, in fact. But I will cover some of his points that he was trying to make, because I think that Peter didn't cover some of the things that I'd want to counter and say, and Peter didn't touch it for some reason. But on this next one, what did we skip one here? No. What is the profile of the average person who is investing in this market, with either buying Bitcoin or buying an ICO other than under established technologies? So what's the profile of the average person who invests? And his Peter's response on this was pretty much a pretty technical person, mainly because the interfaces are out there are not I would say conducive to have the average Joe in it, unless you're downloading like the Coinbase app, and then you're only access to a few cryptos out there right now. So a lot of this has to do with the buying experience and the risk if you lose your keys, if you have your stuff right now. You lose your keys, or you don't understand operational security of your own network or your own phone or any of that. You're like Kanye and have 00000 as your password. That kind of activity is part of the issue there with having an average person be part of this. Is it's going to be still a stretch for them. I think the enhancements on like the new Ravencoin iOS wallet, I've seen a few other wallets like Exodus that make things more user-friendly and easier to use. I mean, there's big buttons that say send and receive, right? It doesn't get much simpler than that, but taking away that edge from people to feel that they're controlling their own financial destiny, and if they mess up one thing, then they lose it. That kind of stigma needs to get tempered before I think you'll have the average Joe really into it. Question here was, how long has cryptocurrency and the blockchain tech been in existence? Peter answered that pretty straightforward. So there was a discussion when it came to some technology like PayPal that's used in China, and one of the functions and features of that is a very totalitarian use of that, where you're taking all the transactions between individuals, think of it like a bank transaction, and putting them on a large database. So it reduces the friction because you can use a smartphone, you can buy something. It makes the movement of money very easy. It's like PayPal, like on steroids, right? However, the reciprocation of the transaction data and all the buying history and where you're at, the location data, all of that stuff being tied together into a huge, massive database, right? So where right now a lot of that activity, like if you're at PayPal and you do something and then your location data is on Facebook, or, you know, you can take a lot of those different elements if you had access to all those APIs, and you could kind of correlate that activity for a particular person. And it would be some painstaking effort to do that. But the difference between what was being discussed there for the China application, and mind you, of why wouldn't you go with this versus something like Bitcoin, was the fact that all that information would be in a single database. And it is very totalitarianism when you think about that, obviously, because then you can have, one, everybody in the same database, and you could start to parse through and create different insights and analytics off of that. But then you get a lot of control for that if it's used in the wrong ways, right? Which obviously it would be if you're in somewhere like China, where they're going to have some level of oppression as part of the government and the culture, right? Of being a communist-based totalitarian democracy on certain topics, right? Where they try to give some latitude for people to be able to do stuff, but it's super communist social systems, right? So one huge database. So if you take away the geopolitical discussion about it, you put that to the side and you just look at it from a technology standpoint, right? Having right there from just the technology implementation of that concept, if we're taking Nouriel's argument to say it's all just a database anyways, why would I do this on a decentralized network on a cryptocurrency blockchain? If you put everybody in one basket, you have the same exact issue right now as OPM had with all of the folks that work on the DoD side or the government side and have all of their personal information hacked, right? You got a huge repository of information with social security numbers and everything else that is a honeypot. And somebody can hack into it once they're an elevated user, be it an insider attack or external attack that gains access to it, and you have a honeypot. Same thing with Equifax. 230 million people. Facebook just recently had a hack with 50 million people, right? The problem here is the structures of that. There's tons of architecture, IDSs, which is intrusion detection systems. There's huge amounts of millions and billions of dollars spent on the prevention of people penetrating systems. And then you have issues from the inside attack, like if you get if you're doing a deep attack and you have a person that's going to be an internal hacker and they get access because they get a job there, they get an elevated role, and now they have access to the system as a privileged user. Still, the issue is the honeypot, right? A huge database. This is the problem in the architecture side, where if you have things, and let's not even talk distributed and decentralized. Even if we take the decentralized piece out of cryptocurrency blockchains and look at just the cryptography piece of it, to where right now, if you look at just the wallets between me and you and everybody else, everybody can go out there and see the ledger, right? But if they want to try to get access to every one of those wallets and every one of that actions that occurred with that piece of that, if you had access into all the metadata with it, you would have to unlock and hack every freaking wallet individually. It's like having on a database architecture, it's like having every row locked at that level to where you don't get access to the whole database. You get access to one record within that database. And from a whole multitude of reasons, you don't do that in current databases right now. You can have row locking capability in that, but there's still going to be somebody that has the administrative access. You know, I get into this argument all the time from a solution architect standpoint with good database, very strong, top of the line, you know, MIT graduate level PhD people on a regular basis and have this conversation about, well, why wouldn't I just use a database for this? And I'm saying at the end of the day, no matter how much architecture security that we have in there, you still have somebody that has global access to everything. And all a hacker has to do is get to that level, and then they have everything, even at a database encrypted security level, right? You still have that attack vector. Where on cryptocurrency, you essentially have, look at the exchange hacks. It isn't that they're hacking every wallet in the exchange. They're hacking the hot wallet, one account that for some reason has all of the cryptocurrency in it, right? And a very basic standpoint, you could split off a hot wallet into 75 to 100 hot wallets and separate all those keys and then create a mechanism that does not allow, there's a threshold of output from each of those, to where if anything, you're just decentralizing or you're distributing your risk there, because now you're protected across multiple accounts, not one single freaking hot wallet with $100 million in it, right? So part of it's strategy and leveling the technology. Part of it is, understanding what is in the realm of possible with that. And part of it is using these systems for what they're really good at and what they've proven with Bitcoin on the decentralization standpoint, to where you have the censorship resistance, you have the immutability piece of it. But on an enterprise, answering that particular question when it comes to an enterprise blockchain, something that's going to be behind a private permissioned ledger, having that separated across multiple nodes across an entire company's ecosystem, a whole bunch of nodes spun up, you are reducing your risk if you put some of those canonical processes into a blockchain. You're absolutely, from a mechanical standpoint, on a blockchain architecture, you're separating your risk there. So these guys are not going to get down to that level. They're not going to get into that architecture discussion, and then have that debate. And there still needs to be there's things that that in certain databases, because of the speed that's required to make certain things function, it needs to have a very high rate of transactions per second. That's part of the whole scaling debates that we're talking about. And if we think about even the Ethereum network, we think about any of the current decentralized, I don't care of BitShares or Steemit or any of the very high frequency amount of transactions, nothing is pale in comparison to current infrastructure in a real-time standpoint for the entire ledger. So when people make a comment about like Visa's architecture or any of the current payment system networks, these are still super segmented. So like your transactions to Visa's network or anything else is very separated in like zones, right? So if you're in Northeast Europe, everybody's swiping their card at the same freaking time in Northeast Europe is load balanced on a whole bunch of different sub databases, right? And then that reconciles up, right? So it's like having copies of the ledgers and then posting and then syncing, right? So having something like Lightning Network and the layer 2 solutions to blockchains, why it's so pivotal is you're essentially augmenting the current existing posting architecture to something like that, to where you can take a bundled transaction set and then compartmentalize essentially through a set of services on that platform and then reconcile over a period of time, right? So, and still have the auditability and the security from having a cryptographic network to do validations and that sort of thing. So bottom line through all of this, and bottom line through the opponents of this architecture and this network, is the technology is evolving. It's been 10 years old. On the commercial and the enterprise level, this is taking the approach that's opposite of what the internet was. The internet started with a very big internal network. And then that scaled out to some colleges and schools, and there was lots of intranets that then started to connect to each other. In the internet world, then the analogy is it started like a private permissioned blockchain and then worked its way to have acceptance on a global level. Blockchain's going the other way around. It started on a permissionless private network, and it's going to always be there. That's the internet, right? That's those transport networks that are going to be out there for forever. And then you have the permissioned private networks that are ultimately going to have private information, items that you don't even have on the internet. You have components of it sent across the internet. But the big databases that have everybody's information is still on that private, database architecture, and by and large, you could argue that the cloud version of that of those databases moving to the cloud is that first bridge of getting into a more distributed concept, right? To where you're not having it within the brick and mortar of a building or your office or whatever that you're taking that information, you're actually putting it out, and then you're connecting to it through a VPN tunnel, right? But blockchains are doing it the opposite way, and they're having anybody can join, right? And it's because it starts with security at the pinnacle first part of it. That every transaction between two parties is digitally encrypted and digitally signed by those two parties, right? And why it's part of a big, huge quote unquote database, it is individually encrypted with specific keys to those two parties, right? The party of the exchange and you, if you're sending money to an exchange, any transaction that you do, you're digitally signing essentially to say, I have approved that. Something like a hardware wallet is just one more step in that process, right? To where you're saying, I'm going to send that money to you, but I have to use this other key for my protection, right? That's what a hardware wallet does for you. So that's the combining of that architecture. And that's why when I'm out on the ground in DC myself and I'm working on the back channels of the architecture side, those are the conversations I have to have with, a leadership group or, a committee or, somebody that's trying to study and stuff. And why I try to bring it to you guys very transparently to say, this is the discussions that need to be had, is that this is not, unfruitful tech. And we're getting to see an agile approach essentially to the implementation of the tech. And we're testing a lot of, all these different crypto groups. And mind you, there's a fraud people you're always going to have people that take good tech and try to exploit it and get money out of it. Because the incentive right now is still for them not to partake in that is still not strong enough. People aren't afraid of going to jail, evidently, right? And the world's big, and there's different municipalities and groups that will protect those that are choosing to go the fraudulent route, because it doesn't affect their particular group. And until, not saying that there needs to be a world police or like that, I think it needs to be evolved to pass that. It's not one group trying to tell everybody what to do. I think it's more of that collectively the tech, and we can lean into innovating the tech to where the incentive just isn't there. The same way that you have attacking the Bitcoin network directly and brute forcing it is very costly, and it's not worth the effort and the expense. That was a very interesting approach when it comes to proof of work. And again, you're going to have opponents against that when it comes to, well, it's a wasteful of electricity. It's a horrible design. And the correction of that is saying, let's find something better if that's the case, because right now there isn't. And there's a couple really good articles that just came out on breaking down the science behind proof of stake and the nothing at stake attack vector that's really this catch-22 for proof of stake right now. And I plan on having that level of engineering discussion at ETH DevCon with trying to figure out or try to understand better, I guess, a lot of the issues with proof of stake and like Casper FFG for Ethereum, and understand that distributed proof of stake model better, because there's still, you don't get something for nothing. And you can't also elevate people that have lots of money to be in power positions, because you're just still going to always have this issue to where when you look at Bitcoin and you look at the implementations of proof of work networks like Ravencoin when it first came out, anybody could have joined it. And we try to bring it to you guys very quickly. I mean, within the same month that Ravencoin came out, I was out there and I'm like, hey, fresh start, great project. People are are trying to improve on a proven technology with Bitcoin by forking it and then adding this asset layer. There's a path, there's a roadmap. Let's see if they can do it. I'm going to throw some hash power to it, and then I'm compensated in the token for participating in that network. The activity is very genuine. The fact that you can do it, it's not fake. You can plug in a machine and start getting Ravencoin. You can start plugging a machine and start getting any proof of work coin on whatever network that you believe in or want to support.